Ken. It's my honor to be here again today. The Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame, which is located in Natchitoches, Louisiana, right on Front Street, right on the Cane River, is a beautiful facility that finally we got our museum opened in 2013. It's a $24 million museum that hopefully many of you can head on up there and check out with the Christmas lights going on in the month of November and December. It's a wonderful weekend or weekday to go there, check out the city, and also the wonderful Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame Museum. Each and every June, we induct our Hall of Fame class. It usually falls the last weekend in June, and in 2017, it was a special class. It was a very diverse class, but it was some outstanding athletes and coaches and leaders in sports in the state of Louisiana. We had David Toms got inducted. He was arguably the greatest golfer from the state of Louisiana. Ed Reed, who went to Destrehan High School, arguably the greatest safety ever to play that position in the NFL. Dee Bro, one of the outstanding coaches of all time in gymnastics, over 40 years at LSU, and they finished number 2 in the country the last couple of years, and many, many others. One of the individuals who was inducted into that 2017 class and won the Distinguished Service Award in sports journalism is Mr. Jim Henderson. Of course, we're very familiar with Jim and his work here in the New Orleans area. Each and every year we induct 2 Journalist Award winners. Mr. Dan McDonald in Lafayette was the other Journalist Award winner. Due to a scheduling conflict, Mr. Jim couldn't be with us in June, so we thought it would be special and deserved to come here to New Orleans, to his hometown, and to present him with his award. Before we do that, we've got I'm going to tell you a little bit about his bio, which is unbelievably impressive, but we also have a video that will show you with some messages, and then we'll hear from Mr. Jim himself. Being a New Orleans guy, I lived in New Orleans. My family's from New Orleans. I grew up here, lived here until I was 13 years old. I remember, not to make Jim feel old, but I remember watching him growing up on WWL. He's been in the business 34 years as the sports director, or was the sports director for 34 years, from 1978 to 2012 at WWL TV in New Orleans. Has been the radio play-by-play voice of the Saints since 1986, except for the 1990 season when he was called to the big leagues to do the national games for CBS TV. He was a 13-time winner of the Louisiana Sportscaster of the Year, selected by the National Sportscasters and Sports Writers Association. He's replaced New Orleans legend and 1990 Distinguished Service Award winner Hap Glaudy as WWL sports director back in the day, and helped the station produce one of the highest rated local news broadcasts in America. As a reporter for CBS NewsPath, Henderson regularly covered major events like the Super Bowl, the Masters, Major League Baseball All-Star Game, and his play-by-play career has allowed Henderson to be the soundtrack for memorable moments in Saints history. We all remember the first playoff victory in 2000, which was the Hakeem dropped the ball call, the NFC Championship game win in January 2010 when Jim Henderson said, "Pigs have flown, hell has frozen over." We all remember that call. The Saints are on their way to the Super Bowl. And then, of course, 2 weeks later, the Saints' victory in Miami, where get ready to party with the Lombardi New Orleans, and I don't think folks have stopped ever since. After retiring from WWL in January 2012, he's remained in the play-by-play role with the Saints. However, his retirement didn't last long. 6 months later, started working over at WVUE as well here in New Orleans. Before we hear from Jim Henderson, here's a little video we put together. I hope you enjoy it.
Snap, placement, kicked by Hartley, and it is good! It's good! It's good! Pigs have flown. Hell is frozen over. The Saints are on their way to the Super Bowl.
Buenos tardes. Good afternoon from Mexico City, where just moments from now, the New Orleans Saints get their 1978 preseason schedule underway against the Philadelphia Eagles.
Hey Jim, this is Drew Brees. I just wanted to wish you a very big congratulations on winning the Distinguished Service Award from the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame. I cannot think of somebody more deserving. Throughout my time here with the New Orleans Saints, you have been such a professional. I view you in such high regard, as I know this entire community does, and certainly all of Who Dat Nation does. You're a model for the rest of us, and certainly everyone within your industry, and I just want to wish you a big congratulations.
You know, through 20 long years, the New Orleans Saints and their fans lost a lot of games, didn't they? A lot of games. But we always won the party.
I wish I could say I'm a wordsmith like yourself. I'm just happy and proud of you. You know, if there's a gentleman that has done everything, you know, really, not only in life, but the broadcasting world, and just gives back. You know, I think that's definitely you. Thank you for helping a young individual like myself, and I know for all the other individuals that you help, we just want to say thank you and congratulate you. And, you know, I know if you're doing one thing, you're doing some fishing.
Yeah, I'll have a little fishing to do this weekend.
Oh,
and,
you're
the
going?
Giants game on
Well, you
Sunday.
didn't ask me.
Oh, well, no, but
Or Garland.
Well, no,
Or
that's
Nash.
That's true too. But I wanted to have a good time.
Hi, Jim. It's Sean Payton. Congratulations on your award tonight. It's certainly well deserved. And man, it seems like only 5 or 6 years. We've been here now 12 years, and I know you've been here a lot longer than that. But yeah, I know you mean everything to Saints fans. You do a great job with your coverage of our team. We always, as coaches and players, get to hear it maybe after the fact, your calls on game day, but we do get to interact and see you throughout the season. And I want you to know from myself, our coaching staff, our team, we think the world of you. We appreciate you, and congratulations again.
Know dat, believe dat, hope that we could, faith that we would, have both been realized as this wonderful feeling washes over us.
A little bit of that outstanding career of Mr. Jim Henderson. I'd like to bring Lenny Van Gilder up here. He is the Vice President of the Louisiana Sports Writers Association. The Louisiana Sports Writers Association are the gentlemen that actually vote on each and every induction class. We look forward to a fantastic event at the end of 2018. But here to present Mr. Jim Henderson with his trophy, his certificate, and his award, Mr. Lenny Van Gilder. Please welcome Mr. Jim Henderson, the 2017 Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame Distinguished Service Award.
Wow, I am truly honored and blessed. It's great to see so many folks here that are my contemporaries and people that go back a long, long way with me in many, many ways. So many great stories I have to share with all of you. You've all been a part of many of them. When I was inducted back in June, I couldn't make the ceremony because we had already booked a fishing trip up to Alaska that I couldn't get out of. So they did a little video with me as I look back on the early days of my career that started in Panama City, Florida, went to Atlanta to WSB, and then came here. And when I was all through with that, I recognized the fact I hadn't thanked anybody from New Orleans. It was all about what had happened before I got here and my early days at WWL. So if that were going to be shown here today, I had thought that, you know what I would do is I would thank everybody in New Orleans at Channel 4 who helped me along the way. So I'll just name them as in the interest of time. J. Michael Early, Mo Gillerman, Phil Johnson, Garland Robinette, Angela Hill, Nash Roberts, Bill Elder, Hoda Kotb, Karen Swenson, Dennis Waltering, and so many, many more. It was just a great, great time. And one of the things that I enjoy so much now about my current role is no longer do some of these people like Ed Daniels, who I've admired throughout my time here, and others, no longer are they my competitors. I can view them as my friends. And that's really been special. I can really enjoy this part of my life now, knowing that the other stuff is behind me. So I get a chance to really enjoy the good parts about my life and about my career, instead of what I know is the drudgery of doing 5, 6, and 10 every day and trying to fit in the Saints broadcast in the meantime and eating a cold and moldy sandwich at my desk while I put my charts together for that Sunday Saints game. Now I can truly enjoy the life that I have, and it's a wonderful one. And two, I needed to thank my wife, who could not be here today, my wife Carol, otherwise known as Stump. To get ahead in this business requires a lot of sacrifice, and she sacrificed greatly in the early days of our marriage. I figured it out in the first 6 years as we chased this dream. In the first 6 years of our marriage, we moved 6 times. Now, a lot of those were because we had been kicked out of our house for not paying, but still, foreclosures were probably a lot of it, but most of it was just to get ahead. There were so many stickers on our furniture that you could date back every other move, and she knew exactly where everything went because it was only less than a year ago that she packed up and unpacked. And as I look at some of the people around here, I could go on a long, long time, Kenny. Longer than David Toms, maybe, too. I can go on a long, long time just telling stories about probably 80% of the people up here. You and I go all the way back to Vero Beach. We roomed together. There were 3 of us in that room in Vero Beach, and one was Bruce Miller. Remember that? Y'all remember Bruce Miller? Well, Bruce goes way back, and did go way back. He's no longer with us, but I remember Archie always used to tell a story on Bruce Miller and Wayne Mack when they did the Tulane games. And as Mr. Curl can tell you, Tulane was not very good during those days. And Bruce was very, very pessimistic. It didn't take long for Bruce to utter, "Oh, brother, circle the wagons." And Archie tells this story about Tulane's getting hammered. They're at home. It's late in the second quarter. Tulane's down like 35-0. The fans are booing and departing. And there's a penalty flag. And Wayne is doing the play-by-play, and Bruce is the color analyst. And Bruce goes, "Oh, Wayne, there's another penalty on the wave. Oh, and it's a 5-yarder. No, it's more than that. It's actually a 10-yarder. Wayne, this is a 15. It's a 20. They're still marching this off. This is a 35-yard penalty against the wave." And Wayne says, "Bruce, I think it's halftime." Oh, yeah. Poor Bruce, when we got on the Saints broadcast, Bruce was the guy that had to do the pre and post game with Jim Mora, who could be about as mean as he could possibly be after a defeat. And poor Bruce had to be the first person to interview Jim Mora after another tough defeat in the locker room. And I swear you could hear him sweat on the radio, because that was what Jim Mora would do to you. Bill Curl, I'll tell one story on Bill. I was just reminding him of this. I admire no one more in the business than Bill Curl. When he was with the Dome, that's when they used to take us out on junkets. We had gone to do the Ali Spinks preview with them up in their training camps, and the Superdome was footing the bill for all this stuff. And I think it was the Wilfred Benitez fight out in Las Vegas that they sent a big group of us out there to preview. So we all took our photographers. I don't know if Ed was on that trip or not, but Buddy D was, Pete Finney was, Bob Ressler was, myself, Bill Curl, and there might have been 2 or 3 other people. So we had to get up early in the morning here to fly out of New Orleans to Las Vegas to go to the respective fighters' camps and to do all our interviews. And just, it was bang, 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 bang once we got out of the ground in Las Vegas. So we worked all day, and we went back to our hotel, and they said, "Okay, shower up, we're gonna have a big dinner downstairs in about an hour." So in about an hour, we're all down there, we're sitting around this table in the casino, and we're being served by these topless waitresses. Very interesting meal, and a very pleasant meal, I might add. Bill's sitting across the table from me, and here are these beautiful women serving us, and I'm thinking, what a great life I have. And Bill and I are kind of reminiscing, and midway through the meal, there was kind of a pause in the service, and I looked around the table, and Bill and I were the only 2 people still awake. And I think now, at 71 years of age, that would be me. I'd be one of them too. Face down in my soup. We just had the greatest of times. I was truly surprised by that, thanks to the Saints people who contributed to that, and everybody else. It's been a great association. It's gone by so fast. I usually, when I speak to people, and they do recall some of those calls in 2009, when we were fortunate enough to go to the Super Bowl, And they asked about the call about pigs have flown, hell is frozen over, the Saints are going to the Super Bowl. And I said, well, you know, I usually get inspired. We have a house up in Mississippi with about 5 acres. I usually get inspired mowing my lawn, thinking about, you know, what I would do, what I would say. And I thought, you know, what would you ever say if the Saints won the Super Bowl, if you were fortunate enough to call that game? And I thought, well, I'd seen people in the Dome holding up signs, pigs fly, or hell freezes, as those people in the Dome often did when the Saints were winning and playing well. And I thought, you know, that's what I would say. I would say, pigs have flown, hell is frozen over. The Saints have won the Super Bowl. Well, Hartley's lining up that field goal to send us to the Super Bowl. And if you're a Saints fan, you're not just anticipating him missing it. You're probably anticipating it being blocked and run back for a touchdown the other way, game over. So there's no chip shot. And when he kicked it, I'm thinking, wow, you know, hell is frozen, pigs have flown, hell is frozen over. Maybe I better go ahead and not press my luck and go ahead and use that now. So I did, and fortunately it took wings, and the pig flying sort of became the symbol of the postseason. And then during the 2 weeks prior to the Super Bowl, we're down in Miami, and this lady called me and said, look, I heard your call about pigs have flown, hell is frozen over, the Saints are going to the Super Bowl. I really think that you ought to say, if the Saints win the Super Bowl, get ready to party with the Lombardi. And kind of like Milton Berle, knowing a good line when I can steal one, I said, you know, that's what I'll say. And fortunately, that lived on as well. Great, great time. I think one of the encouraging things about this season, along with winning 5 straight as they are now, is so many times now as you make reference to other seasons and what's happening now, certain things that statistically that occur, suddenly it said this hasn't happened since 2009, this since 2009, this since 2009. And I'm not saying this team is on its way to the Super Bowl, but it certainly is refreshing after the first 2 games of this year to be where they are now. If you have any questions, again, Kenny, you know me, just say, all right, that's enough, Jim, sit down. But I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have, and having been around coaches for a long time, if I don't want to answer it, I know how to duck it. So you can ask me whatever you want. Yes, sir.
What do you hear about the Jimmy Graham trade coming back? Is there anything to it? Or?
Yeah, I'm going to give you a little secret here. That rumor really started, for the most part, on Twitter. What happened was, there was a little blurb coming out of Seattle. They weren't happy with Jimmy Graham. Maybe Jimmy Graham's on the trading block. My son put that out as a rumor that the Saints were interested in him on Twitter. He put out, rumor has it, just to see what would happen. Sure, it caused you a few sleepless nights or more phone calls. So not only was it really never based in fact, but it prompted Pete Carroll to have to say in Seattle last week, that's total bullshit, there's nothing to it. And I'm so proud that my son contributed to that. So there is nothing to it. But a couple of trades, the trading deadline is later this afternoon. There were a couple of major trades today. Unlike most of the time in the NFL when nothing happens, Jimmy Garoppolo got traded today from New England to San Francisco for a 2nd-round draft pick. And I would hope that somebody in a conference call with Sean Payton in the next couple of days would have the stones to ask him, were the Saints interested in trading for Jimmy Garoppolo? Sean Payton loves Jimmy Garoppolo. Loves it. But thing is, the Patriots drafted Jimmy Garoppolo late in the 2nd round. They only got a number 2 for him now, but it's going to be a high number 2 with San Francisco, probably the 34th, at worst 35th, or 36th pick in the draft. And the Saints don't have a number 2, as I recall. I think it was traded to move up for Alvin Kamara in this year's draft. Am I right, Doug? So the Saints wouldn't even have had a number 2 to do this. And I was hearing some speculation on the way in. During football season, my ear is always on the NFL Network, on Sirius, on all sorts of websites in preparation for the game on Sunday. And what they were saying was, one of the reasons that they had to get rid of Jimmy Garoppolo, and the Patriots now don't even have a backup quarterback on their roster, having traded him, was he's going to command this huge franchise tag because he hasn't signed. They haven't been able to get him long-term under a contract. And if they were going to bring him back and franchising him to keep him, they would have had to pay him more than Tom Brady. And Tom Brady and Jimmy Garoppolo have the same agent. So that might not have worked out so well. So Garoppolo goes to San Francisco for number 2. Jay Ajayi, the running back for the Dolphins, got traded to the Eagles for a 4th. And there might be still some more to come today. This was a good trivia question that we had when the Patriots came here to play. And I heard this on Sirius on the way into work. Was Gil Brandt, who said, you know, here's an interesting, see how many people of you, how many people remember this or know this. The top 3 passers in Eastern Illinois history will all be in the Louisiana Superdome today. Who are they? Well, your head coach, Sean Payton, is one. Jimmy Garoppolo is the other. And the other was the quarterback of the Cowboys, who was up doing the game, Tony Romo. Those 3 guys were the leading passers in Eastern Illinois history, all in the Superdome at the same time. And so we asked that on the air, and a few guys had it. One more thing I'll ask you about, because as you want to ask me things, and I'm here for you. Last night on the show we do on WVUE that airs at 10:30, in the course of it, I asked Juan Kincaid and Sean Fazan, with whom I work, I said, we're halfway through the season with this game on Sunday. 8 games into the Saints season. If the Pro Bowl voting were to take place this week, who on the Saints offense would be voted to the Pro Bowl? You think about it. I can't think of a single person. Who on the Saints defense should be voted to the Pro Bowl? Cam Jordan, Marshawn Lattimore, and Kenny Vaccaro. At least 2 of those 3 guys, barring an injury, will make the Pro Bowl this year. And when was the last time you could ever say the New Orleans Saints defense was more talented in many ways, at least with those 3 people, than an offense? Am I right, Doug? So, any more questions? I'm here for you. Yes, sir.
Jim, there's some of us in here that remember the state of those on the air when you first got here. How does it feel being the only guy who could really command the English language as a New Orleans sportscaster?
Buddy D. Whoa. All right. The customer's always right. That was Hap Gloddy's little signature piece too. You got to remember that back in those days, even though these guys were the sports directors of the station and they were icons, there'll never be another Hap Gloddy. I truly believe there will never be another Buddy D. But in those days, they got their sportscasters from newspapers, because the schools in New Orleans, as we all recognize, is about 5 years behind most major markets. They got their people from newspapers because at that time television and radio broadcasters weren't for the most part being churned out by universities. So they came here with other skills. Skills that unfortunately I think now are being lost in our business. Being a true journalist, working at your craft, being able to write a story. I mean, when I came to Channel 4, and it's not just them, I was always looked upon as the grammarian in the group, and here we were in the communication business, and I was constantly asked on a daily basis, does this verb agree with this subject? Does this pronoun agree with this antecedent? You know, what's the subject of the sentence here? Well, it's not really, if you're looking at the preposition, the object of the preposition, that's not the subject of your sentence. Here's the subject of your sentence. Stuff that I taught 8th graders up in Webster, New York when I was an English teacher. So I'm kind of ducking your question out of deference to them. But when I came here to be interviewed for the job that I eventually replaced Hap on, and I saw his sportscast, and I said, boy, this is going to be easy, because there's not really anybody truly giving you a television sportscast in this market. And then I got here and I was picketed by people the first day on the air because of the loyalty to Hap and the people that loved him. I told this story a million times. The first week I was on the air in May of 1978, I was going to go on the air May 8th. I think it was right around the May flood during that year. And so I was going to go on the air on Monday. So on Monday, I go up to my office and I'm starting to work on my script. And Phil Johnson, who was the news director, poked his head around the corner about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, said, "You okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine." About 2 o'clock in the afternoon, another person from the hierarchy looks around the corner. "Are you all right? You okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm sure. I'm fine." "Well, Phil wants to introduce you on the air on Bill Elder's show at 5 o'clock. "Okay, fine. And what we're going to do," this was before there was real technology in the business, "what we're going to do is we're going to wheel one of the big studio cameras out to the front of the station because people are picketing you." So at 5 o'clock, Phil Johnson came out and introduced me on the Bill Elder set. They took this shot, and there are people walking around with signs saying, "Don't scrap HAP," "Age discrimination," Henderson, "Go back to Atlanta." Everybody hated Atlanta. There were signs across the street. And that was my debut on the show. And I always told people I was one of the first people to come to New Orleans and get run over by the welcome wagon. And as I left my office, we had to walk through the parking lot of Channel 4 to get up to the set on the second level. And as I walked out of the office and turned that corner to walk through the parking lot to go up on the set at Channel 4 for the first time in 1978, I had an armed guard because they were afraid somebody was going to shoot me. And I had an armed guard that accompanied me from the sports office to the set and back for an entire week because they were afraid somebody would take a shot at me. So, but I never had misgivings about coming here. Mr. Early was a giant in the broadcasting business, and they made that move because they were number one and yet knew that there was more of the audience out there that they weren't getting because maybe they weren't truly acknowledging the other people that might be out there. Women, minorities, other people such as that. And so that's why they brought me aboard, and with some of the great people that I was able to work with, and I'm so proud of this, and I had very little to do with it, but I was there for 34 years. We were never anything but number one in every newscast throughout the entire day. Morning, noon, 5, 6, 10. Every newscast we did, we were never anything but number one. So I got out while the getting was good, because that's not the case any longer and probably never will be again.
You already answered my question. Was there a chance you were going to go somewhere else besides New Orleans that you considered?
My plan when I came to Channel 4, my goal in broadcasting was always to work for WSB in Atlanta. I got there with my second job. I went from the 186th market in the country in Panama City to the 16th in the market in the country at the time in Atlanta. And so that was my goal. And I worked my way up to being probably second in the sports office. And the idea was they were about to give me the 11 o'clock. The sports director was a man named Jim Biondi. They were about to give me the 11 o'clock when I got the call from Channel 4 to come and look at WWL. I'd never been to New Orleans, came here just to eat the food and see the city for free on somebody else's dime. And when I was offered the job, the people back at Cox Broadcasting in Atlanta, a guy by the name of John Furman, who was a friend of mine, a friend of Milo Hamilton's at the time, who really was my mentor, he gave me all the background on Channel 4. It's a great place, pay well, be treated great, tremendous stability, one of the best local television stations in the country. So I had that in the back of my mind as I came here, and when I eventually did take the job, the longer I was in it, the more I appreciated it. My goal was always, I thought I'd be here 2.5 years. I'd go back to Atlanta when the job opened up to be number one in the department. And the longer I was here, the more I came to appreciate New Orleans, the more I came to appreciate how different it was, the more I came to appreciate the stability at Channel 4, and I fell in love with it, really. And it really worked out great. When I go back to Atlanta now and we play the Falcons, I'm not sure I'd ever want to live there anymore because of the way it's grown and how much this place has grown on me. And during the years that I was in New Orleans as the sports director at Channel 4, 34 years or so, I think we might have had 4 or 5 different news directors. That was it. If I went back to Atlanta, I bet during the same time they've had 15 or 20. So it was a great break to come here, and I recognized very quickly how fortunate I was to have the opportunity to be not only the sports director of the #1 affiliate in town, but also to be the play-by-play guy. Eventually I was. I came on the broadcast team as the analyst. To also be a part of the #1 and at the time only Major League sports franchise in town. Very seldom do people in my position get a chance to do both. It's usually mutually exclusive because of the duties involved. So I came to appreciate that as well. I'm sure I couldn't have gone back to Atlanta and done the Falcon games and been the sports director at Channel 2. So there were some flirtations at other times. In 1990, when I got a chance to do the NFL on CBS with Hank Stram, when they needed an additional broadcast team, I got a chance to do that, and then they cut back because they lost so many properties. 1990 was the year that CBS had everything. When they cut back, I never looked back with anger, only with appreciation. I got a chance to work at the highest level of this business. They wanted to keep me, but just didn't have enough going on at the time. There were 3 of us that were hired that year at CBS. Myself, Chris Mortensen, and Brad Nessler. And the next year, we were all gone because they didn't have enough work for us. And Chris Mortensen, as he fights cancer, has done wonderfully. Brad Nessler is CBS's SEC play-by-play man, having gotten rid of, well, losing Vern Lundquist this last year. And I got the chance to go right back to Channel 4. And when I was working with Hank Stram on CBS, I heard so many Jack Buck, Hank Stram stories when they were the Monday night broadcast team on CBS radio. And Hank gave me a lot of good advice, some that really wasn't quite as good, but most of the good advice he gave me, he'd always tell me Jack Buck stories. And he said Jack Buck worked at KMOX even when he was doing stuff for CBS. And Jack Buck said, don't ever lose your local broadcasting opportunity, because he could always go back to KMOX and do the same job. And I thought about that, and I said, you know, I thought I was on my way. I thought I was going to be a CBS announcer the rest of my life. But when it finally ended, even though they wanted to keep us, I was able to come right back to Channel 4. And because Jack Buck had told them, look, I might get the A game this week with CBS, I might get the B game, the C game, I might not get any game, but I can always go back to KMOX. So fortunately, I never cut ties with WWL, and I was able to come back. And no other place really, because of the certain situation that I had here, really appealed to me. I was never unhappy enough to want to go, and that was the case for 34 years. Yes, sir.
Yes, Mr. Henderson. Having grown up here, seeing Phil Johnson with his editorials, and then for you to come in, I mean, I would love to just be at a round table listening to you two conversate. I mean, it must have been amazing. I'd like to know, how much did the Buddy D's and the Haplottes around here, did they influence you at all, or did you already come in with preconceived notions? And if you could you share the one Buddy D story you made me cry on the air over after he passed, was the one where he confused the football player with the wrestler?
Oh, yeah. Brian Joswiak and Dombrowski. Oh, man, there's so many Buddy D stories. But no, I can't say that they really influenced me, except they intimidated me, because they knew New Orleans so well. And they knew the local scene, the high school scene. To me, that was always the hardest part. These guys, Ed and Kenny, do such an incredible job with it. But to me, that was always the hardest part, because I didn't grow up going to a New Orleans high school. I didn't understand the rivalries of the Catholic League. I never had the appreciation for it. I was trying to get plugged in as a person who grew up in upstate New York. So for the most part, they didn't influence me as much as intimidate me. I remember going on one of these junkets and being in the airport here in New Orleans as we were all getting ready to leave, and all the people that would come up and say hello to Buddy. Hey, Buddy, what's going on? Hey, Buddy, how you doing, man? He's going to win the 5th race at the fairgrounds today. And I'm thinking, holy Christ, nobody knows who I am. I wonder if I'll ever have the opportunity to be at least somewhat viewed in the same light that they were. There's so many great Buddy D stories. One thing I would invite you to do, if you ever want to, and now that I'm getting older and have time off at night and more nostalgic, I go through some of the old clips that are on YouTube of stuff that they took of us at Channel 4, and some of it was used here. And one of them was a roast that we did of Buddy D out in UNO. And it's about an hour long, but I was the MC of it, and I thought it was one of the best things I was ever a part of. And I looked at it the other night in its entirety, and one of the things that really got to me was how many of those people aren't around any longer. Obviously, Buddy, he died, I think, within the year after that roast. He died, I think, right just before Katrina. Yeah, 2005, around February of 2005, and then of course Katrina came in August. So Buddy was the honoree, no longer there. Other guys that were roasters, Dave Dixon, Pete Finney, Vince Marinello for other reasons. Who else was some of the other roasters? Jim Moore was one of the roasters. Kenny Wilkerson, there's another one, that's right. Kenny Wilkerson was another. Alec Gifford was one of the roasters. All those people aren't around any longer, and time goes by so quickly. And so a couple of things that I recall out of that roast was, Buddy was brutal on Jim Moore. Just brutal. On his whole family, actually. His wife, Connie, who he disparaged on the air for not being a beauty queen. And he was just brutal on Jim Moore. So this is a roast, and if you've ever been to roast, everybody's no holds barred, it's just fun. You poke fun at each other, you poke fun at the honoree of the roast. Jim Moore came loaded for bear. And he just tore into Buddy. And it really got to be a little embarrassing because that was not the nature of the roast, But Jim Moore was going to get his pound of flesh out of Buddy's butt one last time and did so. But the question you're asking about the wrestler was, we were in Hammond training at Southeastern. And the Saints, there were two offensive linemen at the time that the Saints were looking at in the first round. One was Brian Joswiak out of Midwest School, and the other was Jim Dombrowski, who went to Virginia. So the Saints went ahead and drafted Jim Dombrowski, and this was his rookie year of training camp. Well, Buddy had confused Brian Joswiak with Jim Dombrowski, who Buddy called Jim Jumjowski. And so he's doing an interview with him, and Brian Joswiak, when he came into the pros, was noted. A lot of these guys that play on the offensive and defensive lines were wrestlers in college because it gave them footwork and gave them leverage and really prepared them for the task at hand as an offensive lineman. So Buddy's conducting this one-on-one interview with Jim Jumjowski, and he had confused him with Brian Joswiak. And so he says, I just wanted to ask you, Jim, about your wrestling career. And Jim Dombrowski goes, Buddy, I think you're confusing me with Brian Joswiak. And Buddy, just like this, says, well, did you ever want to be a wrestler? And the Saints had drafted another guy around the same time named Michael Adams, who was a cornerback, high draft choice. And there are a few people, unfortunately, who are like this in the pros. Darren Sproles is another who truly, Patrick Robinson, just truly can't express themselves when they get in a situation where there's any sort of tension at all. And Buddy's doing a live shot with Michael Adams for 6 o'clock. I'm here with Michael Adams. Michael, and he asks him the first question, and Michael goes, and he turns around and walks away. This is live on TV. But he's going, Michael, I'll come back here. And he never did. He walked away from it in the course of the interview and never came back for the live shot. And of course, there's the Dante Stallworth story as well. There was a quarterback with the Vikings, Dante Culpepper. And the Saints had drafted Dante Stallworth, #1. And this is when WWL on draft day had this huge draft fest. Draft fest, what year would that have been? 2001 maybe, or something like that. Draft Fest 2001 was this huge show that WWL was doing, big tent and everything. And as Buddy came on the air to open these proceedings, he said, and welcome to Jazz Fest. No, Buddy, it's Draft Fest. Jazz Fest is something altogether different. Well, in the course of the draft, the Saints had taken Dante Stallworth, #1, wide receiver. And Buddy, all the time that he's on the air for the first half hour after the draft, calls him Dante Stallpepper. confusing Dante Culpepper with Dante Stallworth and combining the two, so now he's Dante Stallpepper. So after he'd said it about 5 times in the first 15 minutes of Jazz Fest, during a break, somebody comes up to Buddy, you probably don't know you're saying this, but you're calling Dante Stallworth Dante Stallpepper. Buddy, just like this, says, oh, that's not possible. And of course it was. But only for Buddy. God, he's a great guy. God rest his soul. Anybody else? Yes.
Your favorite player and your favorite coach of all time?
Just with the Saints? Boy, oh boy. I can't name just one player. I will name a couple of them. Guys I worked with, Archie Manning, Hokie Gaijan, Stan Brock. They were all an analyst with me at one time or another. Sam Mills. I don't know if you saw the 30 for 30, or this was in NFL Life maybe a couple of weeks ago when they did the story of Sam Mills. And the people that always impressed me the most, as far as coaches, well, that'd be a hard one too. Probably Bum Phillips, because he really brought you into the inner circle. I did Bum Phillips' coaching show when he first came here. In fact, we knew he was coming here before anybody else ever did. We were tipped to that. So I was kind of prepared for Bum Phillips coming aboard, but when he came in 1981, these were truly the old days. And he coached out of a tower because his feet were so bad from wearing cowboy boots his entire life. He didn't want to walk around on the field, so he would coach out of this tower. And he would invite people from the media to come up there and stand with him and talk to him in the course of the training session in Vero Beach. I don't think that would ever happen again. So he really welcomed me in. And doing his show, I learned about the inner workings of a football team, about the machinations to some degree, about the egos, about realizing that you're going to impact somebody in one way no matter what you do. So probably Bum Phillips. We did his coaching show on Thursday morning at 7 a.m. And we'd be up all night on Wednesday editing it and putting it together. We'd come back in after 2 or 3 hours sleep to do his show because he wanted to do that before the day really began for him. And one time, it must have been in December, and I walked in and Bum with his cowboy hat was already sitting on the set, half asleep. And I said, hey Bum, how you doing? He kind of croaked like that. I said, oh man, you got a bad cold, don't you? He goes, yeah. He said, I hope it turns into pneumonia. I said, really? He said, yeah, they know how to cure pneumonia. They don't know how to cure a cold. So we had a great time with him. I remember when the Saints traded Wes Chandler. I'm sitting on the set with him at 7 o'clock in the morning that day. He goes, I thought you might want to know this. I just traded Wes Chandler to the San Diego Chargers. I said, are you kidding me? That's huge. He was the #1 draft choice like in 79, 78 I guess it was. And 79 was Russell Oaksley, but 78, he said, my God, that's a big story. I got to go ahead and report that. He goes, no, can't do it. I said, why? I said, I haven't told the team yet. I got to tell the team before you can report it. And so we had to go out there for that training camp session, pretending we didn't even know that Wes Chandler was no longer a part of the team, and had to act surprised when Bum announced this trade of Wes Chandler to San Diego. So a lot of candidates, to answer your question in a long-winded way, which I'm famous for, probably just to name one coach, and they all contributed to where I am today in one way or another, would probably be Bum Phillips. And the players, so many good ones. But in the old days, you got a chance to really know the guys, right? It's not that way any longer. Because of free agency, they move on, new guys arrive. Because the media is so pervasive now, it used to be just 3 or 4 of us out there at camp every day, right, Ed? Occasionally. You might go out on Wednesday or Tuesday and that'd be pretty much it. Now the media is so pervasive, and with the advent of social media and everything, you're kind of the enemy. That's kind of the way they want to portray you, and I think that's kind of the way they portray you to the team. So believe me, to have Drew Brees say that about me just tells you what a great guy he is. Because I don't know Drew Brees. I don't know any of these guys anymore. And I think probably a part of it too is getting older. I mean, these guys are young enough to not only be my sons, maybe be my grandson. So you kind of lose that aura about a player. The longer you're in it, the older you are, and how you recognize your role in life and really the true importance of the game when you think of the entire scope of things. I'll leave you with one more anecdote, and I got a million of them. But before a broadcast starts on the radio, the butterflies are a little bit there. I mean, you've worked all week for this. It's one of only 16 opportunities you get in the course of the regular season. So there's always going to be a little bit of tension. And I'd read Jim Nantz's book, and I love reading books about people who do what I do, only at a much bigger level, to try to learn from them. And Jim Nantz said in the course of this book, no matter how big the event, he's called all the big events. He said, I always try to find maybe just 5 minutes to get away and just truly appreciate what I have in my life. And it kind of calms me down. So I try to do that, but still, there's always something going on just before the broadcast. You're a little uptight, you're getting ready to show what you hopefully prepared for the entire week. And we might have been in like Cincinnati, and we're having problems electronically. Our signal's breaking up, we can't hear ourselves, our headsets are out, and this is like 5 minutes before game time. So we're all getting kind of flustered, and they call in this old engineer, and the engineer bends over the console and bends over where the microphones are, showing the crack of his butt as he does so. He's got his head under there and he's working on things, and he thinks he's got it done, but he's not really sure. As we're saying, it's getting closer and closer and closer. And he turns around and he looks up at us, me and my broadcast partner, and he says, you know, it's all bullshit. And I said, you know what? You're right. It is. We work, that's the job we work at. In the scope of things, I was so much more effective to society being a high school or junior high English teacher in Webster, New York, than I ever would be, even with the great honors that I've been able to achieve here. You got to put things in perspective. We work at our hobby. It's fun and games. It's a toy department of life. And I think sometimes we don't recognize that enough. But all you people who've been around sports do, I'm sure, what a great part of our lives it's been. I would never be even close to where I am in so many ways without sports and without people like you. Thanks a lot.